Hello, my name is Chelsea Egbert, and my group members for the leprosy Hansen's disease presentation are Sean Grady. He'll be talking about transmission and history. Hannah Nelson will be talking about signs and symptoms and also treatment. Alyssa Miller will cover etiology and prevention, and um, I'll get to talk about the reservoir in addition to introducing today. So leprosy or Hansen's disease is a bacterial disease. It's known as under two major types, paucibacillary and multibacillary, um, also known as tuberculoid or lepromatous. And those will be talked about more in etiology. The bacterium is called Microbacterium leprae, Microbacterium being the genus and leprae being the species.
Okay, like Chelsea said, the scientific name is Mycobacterium leprae. It's a bacterium that is a bacillus bacterium, which means it's a long, thin, filamentous, rod-shaped bacterium. It's 1 to 8 microns long and 0.2 to 0.5 microns in diameter. The gram-stain results would be gram-positive, but it's known as an acid-fast bacteria. It is a gram-positive because there is no outer membrane and it has a thick peptidoglycan layer. However, the gram stains tend to not stick as well because it has a waxy mycolic acid around the cell, which makes the acid-fast dyes more reliable. In the bacteria, it is aerobic, non-motile, and non-spore forming because less than half the genomes contain functional genes, and that is due to gene deletion and gene decay. It has an obligate intracellular parasite, which means it cannot survive on its own. It needs a host. It has the longest doubling time of all bacteria, which is 13 to 14 days, and because of that, it cannot be cultured in a lab. It will die before it can double, and so it is grown to be studied in the soles of mice feet. The average incubation period is 2 to 5 years, but can be as much as 20. It thrives in cooler temperatures, so the appendages of the bodies are most affected, such as the fingers and toes and nose. No endospores are produced in the dormant phase. It is also the only mycobacterium known to infect nervous tissue. The pathogenesis is not entirely known, because of the difficulty in studying it because it can't be grown in the lab, but it is thought to have two ways, tuberculoid, also called paucibacillary, and lepromatous, known as multibacillary. The WHO classifies it as mild to severe, and Ridley-Joplin classifies it in 5 different severities. In tuberculoid, it multiplies at the entry site of, which is most likely the skin or a cut on the skin. It invades Schwann cells and gets helper T cells and epithelioid cells and giant cells to help it invade the skin. And it's manifested in dry, raised patches of the skin with red edges. Lepromatous, it multiplies in macrophages, which it also gets helper T cells to help at that point, but there's no epithelioid or giant cells. And it gradually will destruct the cutaneous nerve, causing nerve damage and folding skin, and it can lead to the loss of fingers, toes, and other appendages.
Great, so I'll get to talk about the reservoir. The reservoir is the natural habitat of a microbe, and as you can see in our lovely little cartoon on the side, the reservoir for our disease, leprosy, is a human, which can be kind of confusing because it's also known that it has an animal reservoir. There are other mammals that can contract the disease, such as some unfortunate wild armadillos. As we talked about, the Bacillus bacterium, Mycobacterium leprae, is what causes leprosy, and the microbe, or the reservoir for the microbe, is a human. So carriers of the microbe can carry a maximum of 7 billion organisms or even more in each gram of tissue, and 1 million on the total in the lower end. So you're looking at both ends of the spectrum that Alyssa talked about, the paucibacillary and multibacillary. The pauci being the higher or the lower end, and the multi being the higher end. The microbe resides in the nasal mucus and deep in the dermis layer of the skin of the carrier, sometimes in the squamous tissue of the epidermis as well. Mycobacterium leprae takes its time to become active. Alyssa talked about that, and the bacterium can stay dormant in the skin from anywhere from 1 to 20 years, with an average of 5 years for it to stay dormant before it becomes active, or before it starts to manifest itself through symptoms and signs. And as we can see, there's a lot of bacterium in each bit or each gram of the bacteria.
For transmission, while doing research on transmission, I found that there were a lot of myths around leprosy. One of the common myths is that leprosy is very contagious. People often think that it's transmitted through physical contact and touching and proximity. The truth, however, is that leprosy is not that contagious. Transmission usually occurs over a period of long period of time with people that you come in contact with people that are carrying leprosy. This can take anywhere from a few months to years. The exact mechanism is still unknown. However, it is believed to be passed through the respiratory route through the inhalation of Bacillus bacterium. Leprosy is passed from person to person through droplets from the nose and mouth during close and frequent contact with someone that has leprosy. And just to make it aware that it is still unknown at the exact mechanism, but this is how it is most likely transmitted from one person to another.
All right, so I'm doing the signs and symptoms. Signs are anything that other people can see, or the doctors, anything visual. So signs of leprosy would be skin lesions, usually lighter than your normal skin color, painless ulcers, hypopigmented macules, nose disfigurement, flat patches of skin, enlarged nerves in your knees and elbows, and shortened fingers and toes. Some symptoms would be only things that the patient can necessarily tell or feel. And those would be muscle weakness, eye problems, decreased sensation of skin with heat, pain, or touch, numbness in body extremities, and nosebleeds and stuffy noses.
As Sean said, this disease is not as contagious as originally thought, and 95% of people have a natural immunity to it, which means they are genetically unsusceptible to contracting this disease. A key point in not contracting it is don't touch armadillos. They are the only known mammal that has signs and symptoms that are similar to humans of leprosy. If you're infected, you should avoid school, work, and childcare until treated. It is a treatable disease that can stop it being contagious. Close prolonged contact for the disease is required for contractions, so people traveling to areas where the disease are present are at low risk. There is no current approved vaccine, although some countries use the tuberculosis vaccine, Bacillus calmette-guerin, or BCG, since the tuberculosis bacteria is similar to the leprosy Mycobacterium leprae. There are a couple other leprosy-specific vaccines in the animal testing phase, and one post-exposure vaccine that just got moved to the human trial phase.
All right, so for the treatment for leprosy, there's something used called the multiple drug therapy, which is multiple drugs at once. And you aren't supposed to use one of those specific drugs alone. They're all supposed to be together. And depending on the different classifications of leprosy, that depends on the different types of medicine. So for postbacillary leprosy or tuberculoid leprosy, that is a 6-month use, and you use dapsone, which is a bacteriostatic, and rifampicin. For multibacillary leprosy, also known as lepromatis, that is a 12-month regimen, and you use dapsone, rifampicin, and clofazimine. And then this one is specifically just for those who have one skin lesion, and it's a single dose, and you use all 3 antibiotics at one time, and that's rifampicin, olfoxacin, and minocycline.
So for the history of leprosy, leprosy has been around since the early 600 BC. This disease has a very negative stigma attached to it. Having leprosy made people into outcasts and were often seen as cursed. During the medieval times, people with leprosy were forced to wear special clothing and also carry around a bell in order to let people know that they were near them. Even though leprosy has a cure, it leaves the person with irreversible damage, visible damage. This visible damage can include paralysis, blindness, and disfigurement. So even with people being cured of leprosy, there's still a negative stigma around them because they carry kind of the aftermath of leprosy. Regardless of people being treated, many countries still have laws in place that discriminate people with leprosy. These laws include forbidding people with leprosy to run for office or have driver's license. And this includes even if they're cured of leprosy. And it is also listed leprosy as a grounds for divorce in some countries. So the next slide is this leprosy today. So this is a representation of 2015 by the CDC. This includes 136 countries, and it has 211,973 new cases in 2015. India accounts for 60% of all new cases. Brazil accounted for 13% of all new cases, and Indonesia accounted for 8% of all new cases in 2015. And 32 countries reported 0 new cases in this study. So this just gives you a brief overview of where leprosy is occurring today. And in the last 20 years, over 16 million people have been treated for leprosy.
Okay. And this is our works cited slide where we included the websites that helped us find our information. Thank you for watching. I'll be able to type this up and send it as soon as possible.